Pre-show quid pro quo. Karen, you get one question. It can be any question in the world. It can be, I don't know, what I had for breakfast, which one of these streetcars here in Toronto is my favorite to go on. None of them. It can be any question in the world. Go ahead and ask.
Okay. I was wondering if you've lived in other places beside Toronto, and I just learned today you've bounced back and forth between Toronto. Is Toronto your final resting place? Do you have dreams of going to what's your next home if that's where you want to leave?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Truthfully, it's been going around a lot in my mind. I don't know how much longer I can stay in Toronto. I was raised out in the country in Alberta, the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And I've tried to convince myself over the last, 16 years that I'm a city person, and it hasn't worked. I don't know if I am a city person, so I've been thinking recently I might like to go back to the country somewhere. Truth be told, I don't think I would ever want to move outside of Canada. I think Canada is a very interesting country. We have problems, but I think that there's just something about the people here. We're a pretty good bunch. So if I had my druthers to move anywhere right now, I would probably want to find something on Vancouver Island. I really enjoy it there. My family used to take trips out there. There's something about the huge trees, the Douglas fir trees out there. Not just the namesake, obviously, but I really enjoy everything on Vancouver Island. So if I had my druthers, I would probably move there. But Toronto, the sexy part of the relationship is kind of waned away now, and now I'm just here kind of functionally. I enjoy the friends that I've made here, but I think maybe perhaps my time might be coming to an end sooner rather than later. Yeah. But you also haven't lived in Toronto your entire life. You're from where I'm from. You're from out west. Do you like Toronto?
I do. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if I get to answer the same question that I just asked, but
I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure. Yeah, I do. Well, I've been here 8 years. I lived in Calgary before this, and I do remember the last 3 or 4 years I lived in Calgary, just feeling anxious, feeling restless, knowing that Calgary's not my home. It's not where I'm meant to be. I got to go somewhere. And I was thinking Montreal or Vancouver or Toronto. Never outside of Canada, though.
No.
And now I'm in Toronto, and for all its pluses and minuses, I just know, and just having difficulty just getting my footing the first year or two I was here, but still always having the feeling that I am happy here. This is where I'm meant to be. I really like it. Do not have the urge. I'm in the entertainment business, so all my peers are all like, let's get the hell out of Canada and go to LA where we can be famous. You can't be famous in Canada. Or like, no, I got health care. I'm good. And then if you guys all leave, I can get your gigs.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, that's right. I'll take all your Canadian jobs. I'm fine here.
Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This? A podcast that wonders if you are familiar with familiars. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and in this podcast we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the supernatural, the paranormal, and the weird. If you haven't tuned into the show before, basically what happens is that I give a list of about 25 topics to my guests. They get to choose one of those topics, and then they come in and then we record. It's a way of getting people to be a little bit more familiar with the aspects that make up the world of magic or the occult or the esoteric or the Western mystery tradition. I had a comment recently. Somebody asked me, why even have a guest? And truth be told, it's a way for me to, one, be able to talk to somebody, but it's also, think of this podcast as sitting in on a tutoring session about one topic. So that's kind of why I have guests. And I have a really special guest here today. Her name is Karen. Karen, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm here to be the guest part. I'm nodding along, so take that, listeners. This is a two-person operation.
There you go. Karen, you've chosen a very interesting topic. You have chosen the topic of ancient Egyptian magic. Now, I have to let it be known that I could talk about ancient Egypt for hours, for absolute hours. I am obsessed with Egypt. I absolutely love it. And I think this goes across the board with many people. I think there's something about the idea of ancient Egypt that is really attractive to a lot of people. I think when we're kids, the idea of the mummies or the temples and the pyramids, they touch us some way. They have a hold on our imagination, kind of like the dinosaurs, I think. We see something that is almost alien and miraculous, and yet we know that it existed at one point, and that somehow whatever they had going is so different and foreign from us that somehow keeps us enthralled, even to this day. And it certainly did for me. I'm going to tell a small little story. I know everybody loves the Little Doug stories, so here's one. When I was about 8 years old, my family took a vacation. We went to Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is, that's where most people go on vacations that are cheap if you live in Alberta. The first place we went to was the MGM Grand. It was all right. I enjoyed it. It was about movies and stuff like that. But there was a hotel close to it called Luxor. Looks like a giant pyramid, and there's a light that comes out of the top of the pyramid. I was enthralled with this. So a year later, when my family decided to return to Las Vegas, because, I don't know, we're unoriginal family, and whatever, kids, shut up, just enjoy where you are. My parents booked a room at the Luxor, and I got to stay there. And it was cool because it had an artifact from the tomb of King Tutankhamun.
What?
Yeah. They have a little, it's like a little mini museum that they have there. Most of the stuff in there is all of it's fake. It's Las Vegas.
Okay,
fake.
I was going to say they didn't really have an artifact. It was like a replica.
They did. They had a block of stone from the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was very, I don't know. It was kind of boring, but the idea to me was, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm seeing that thing that when I was a kid that really captured me. This is great. And I bought like a little, one of those like keychain names with Egyptian hieroglyphs. I bought a book that shows you how to do Egyptian hieroglyphs, and the letters of the English alphabet had the hieroglyphs stamps on it. I was off and running, and since then I've never been. I would cram. I remember finding E.A. Wallace Budge's The Egyptian Book of the Dead and reading that in the back of the bus because I didn't have any friends. Anyways, I read all of Wallace Budge's books, and right up until now, my love for ancient Egypt has not dimmed. I'm eternally grateful for you to pick this topic because I think this is one that people should really listen to, and we should listen to this one earlier. Even before recording this, I know that I'm recording a special episode, not just merely due to the fact that I really, really love it. So, let's dive in. You ready?
Okay, sure.
Let's go. I'm not going to be talking too much about the history or too much about the pyramids or too much about the mythology of ancient Egypt. I'm basically not going to be talking at all about Hermeticism or the Greek magical papyri, that kind of thing. So we're going to be concentrating on ancient Egypt. And having said, I'm not going to talk about the history, let's talk about the history. So the first thing that we need to understand about ancient Egypt is time scale. So the consensus as to when the ancient Egyptian empire started, it was started by a guy called either Narmer or Menes. That would have been in 3100 BC, and kind of considered the last of the native-born pharaohs would be a guy called Nectanebo II, and that was in 342 BC. Between that's 2,800 years. That is a long period of time. Karen, if I was to say the words ancient Egyptian empress, who would you say?
I guess Cleopatra.
Cleopatra,
sure.
Exactly. We are closer in time to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the first pharaoh of Egypt.
Holy hell.
So we are talking about an extraordinary amount of time, right?
As you said just a few seconds ago, like 2,800 years, something like that.
2,800
than
years.
Our, current day counting. We're at 2100 or 20, whatever year it is.
2020.
Okay, yeah. 2,100? No. Okay.
So yeah, we're closer to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the person that united Upper and Lower Egypt. So this is an empire that has no peer. They are the empire that has lasted for longer than anything else. So in this episode, what people need to understand is that I am talking about things that might sound very specific. They are going to be very, very broad strokes, right? Things that occurred in the Old Kingdom weren't the same as the things that occurred in the New Kingdom. I'll get into what that is a bit later. The mythology of Memphis is different than that of the mythology of Heliopolis or Hermopolis, but some of the stories kind of remain the same. The minute details, a lot of them are different. So I just want people to know we're talking about such a huge amount of time that it's nearly incomprehensible to our minds. Just keep that in mind, if you will. What is the story of ancient Egypt? I'm going to give you a small Coles Notes. I always give the Coles Notes, so here we go. So there was a bunch of villages in and around the Nile. There was kind of like Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. There was a dude by the name of Narmer or Menes. They don't really know who because it was a long time ago. This guy, he united these two places, Upper and Lower Egypt. He was kind of considered the first pharaoh. And death was an important part to the Egyptians. We know that now with their mummies and whatnot, and their building of these large tombs. The very first pyramid that we kind of know of is one called Djoser in the Saqqara site. Then eventually we get to the Great Pyramids. They were commissioned by the pharaoh Khufu, or also known as Cheops or Cheops. After time, they started building less complex tombs for their kings, but they had writing in them. These are called the pyramid texts. This period of time is known as the Old Kingdom. Then there was a collapse. We don't really know how it collapsed. They said it could have been environmental, could have been disease, that kind of stuff. Things begin to get good again for them. Their afterlife beliefs weren't exclusive to just the pharaoh. They soon became available to regular people, that everybody can go to this afterlife. The priests started to take over. Then they started to write, instead of in pyramids, they started putting these writing in coffins. This is called the coffin texts. Very interesting. Then it collapsed again. And this time it was due to invasion, I believe. But like a good civilization, you can't keep it down. They bounced back again. This period of time is called the New Kingdom. Besides the pyramids, this is what everybody knows is ancient Egypt. You have Luxor, you have figures such as Ramses II, King Tutankhamun, Nefertiti, Akhenaten. I could go on. So when we think of ancient Egypt, most of the time we're thinking about the New Kingdom. And what happens? Well, it collapses again. And this final collapse is kind of the one that really does ancient Egypt in. Egypt is severely wounded, and it never really comes back from this. There's constant invasion from other people, the Persians being one of them, and they're always being ruled from elsewhere, Alexander the Great, etc., etc. And that's kind of the way that their civilization ended, not with a bang, but with a whimper. And what needs to be known also is that there are some huge question marks as far as the history of ancient Egypt is concerned. There's a ton of stuff that we still to this day have no idea. It's funny if you look kind of at the list of pharaohs, a lot of their names have like question marks beside them. We don't know. We don't really know. Which is what happens when you have a civilization that lasted for as long as theirs did.
I guess I wondered the question was about, was it we didn't know if that was their name or if that was when they lived, or just, we just don't know who, like there's a body in here, it might be this guy?
Both. Well, the stuff that we find in the tombs, specifically in the Valley of the Kings, is pretty good. They kind of got it down by that time. But we're talking Old Kingdom, in between the first collapse and the second collapse, that period of time, a lot of the ones were just kind of like, this guy must have been important. This is when he might have been the king. But right? That's kind of where we're at right now. So what we lack in history, we have in mythology and in spades. The metaphysics of ancient Egypt, their ontology, and all of that fun stuff. What I mentioned earlier, the pyramid texts and the coffin texts, these are essential for us to be able to understand what went on and what the ancient Egyptians believed, and they are worth going through. If you guys like this kind of stuff, as I do, they are essential to read. What we do know is that ancient Egyptians lived an incredible existence. They did live in harsh times, make no mistake about it. Their way that they enchanted their world was very interesting. There's kind of this thing that goes around with people that study ancient Egypt that says, we can't even imagine the mind space the ancient Egyptians had. And I say bullshit. I'll talk a little bit about it later, but I think some people, especially people that are more mystically inclined like myself, we can actually know a little bit about how they lived their lives. What we do know is that they were surrounded by gods. They were surrounded by demons. They were surrounded by forces. And of course, and because while you're listening to this podcast, they were surrounded by magic. So let's talk about Heka. First off, most people that are new to magic or just getting into it, were told that the Egyptian god of magic is this god called Thoth, or Toth, or Tahuti, or whatever you want to call him. Although he is important to magic, he's not exactly the best representation of magic. Thoth was the god of writing, of mathematics, of wisdom, and of a ton of other things. Heka was one thing, and he was magic. Magic was Heka, and Heka was magic. So he was an all-pervasive force of life, death, and creation. But I think the best word that describes Heka is manifestation. What we need to understand, what is essential about Heka as magic, is that the Egyptians put him first, before anything. I'm going to read from one of the coffin texts here. I believe it's called Spell 261. So
this just reminds me of being in church. Like, everybody, let's turn to Spell 261.
Here you go. You ready? I'm going to put on my ancient Egypt priest voice. Right. O noble ones who are before the Lord of the All, behold, I have come before you. Respect me in accordance with what you know. I am he whom the unique Lord made before two things had yet come into being in this land, by his sending forth of his unique eye when he was alone, by the going forth from his mouth, when he put Hua into his mouth. I am indeed the son of him who gave birth to the All, who was born before his mother yet existed. I am the protection of that which the unique Lord has ordained. I am he who caused the Ennead to live. I have seated myself, O bulls of heaven, in this my great dignity as Lord of Kaz, heir to Re-Atum. I have come that I might take my seat, that I might receive my dignity, for to me belonged the universe before you gods had yet come into being. Descend, you who have come in the end. I am Heka. Guitar solo, right? Anyways. Yes, all that exists in the spiritual and the material world is because of magic, and is specifically because of Heka. Now, the best way of explaining Heka is, I'm going to read again because I'm classy like that. This is from Christian Jacques, who is a kind of an expert on ancient Egypt. He says, this magic can perhaps be defined as the essential energy which circulates in the universe of the gods as well as in that of humans. Spirit and matter are woven out of the same substance. The important thing in the practice of magic is to identify the thread which links everything and unites all creatures in a chain of cosmic union. I love the fact that the Egyptians put magic first. This is fucking awesome to me. Magic was the means through both life and death. All creation returns to the Godhead or the All, that the unmanifest source of all that exists. Now, when I use that word when we're reading the coffin text, Hua, what is Hua? That is kind of the logos. I know I talked to you a little bit about before. Within a Christian framework, the logos is kind of the word of God. So the best way of explaining it is, if you go to the Bible, the very first thing in the Bible is, in the beginning was the Word. By the going forth from his mouth when he put Hua upon his mouth. Words were incredibly, incredibly important to the ancient Egyptians, with both their writing and the way that they spoke. And so this is where they thought the manifestation of magic came from, via Heka. They had a ceremony, and if people know even a little bit about ancient Egyptian magic, they kind of know about this thing called the opening of the mouth ceremony. And it was something that was done to either statues, but a lot of times done to mummies, in which they would do a ceremony, and it would allow them to speak in the afterlife. So words were incredibly, incredibly important. Yeah, no, it's really interesting stuff. We have to take a step back. What were the gods to the ancient Egyptians? If most people you talk to that kind of know a little bit about this, they'll say that the gods are like universal concepts as gods, sure, right. Others would say that they're kind of orders of being, yes. What I want to say is that for ancient Egyptians, if it was important to them in any respect, there was a god for it. People nowadays would say that's a bit confusing or that's a bit messy. To us, yeah, sure. They weren't dumb. I don't think people could say that they were just, they just giving gods out. No, they actually were very complex. And if you get into Egyptian mythology, even their cosmogenesis, it's very, very complex. And in some strange way, you can see why these things were important to the Egyptians, even without reading books about them. To most people, I want them to understand about ancient Egypt. What were the things that were sacred to them? And that's the key to understanding Egypt, is what was sacred in their world. Is that everything? If so, how? This is why I fucking love the Egyptians, because they granted godhood and divinity and sanctity to almost everything. the wind, the sun, the stars, certain animals, and it was all tied together. And this, I'm going to use the A word again. I'm going to say animism. I connect with this. I like granting an interiority and an agency to things that we would just see as either being like, that's an animal, or that's a dead god, or that's just an atmospheric effect. If it was important to the Egyptians, there was a god for it. So cynical views would say that they just created meaning. They saw things and they just kind of gave a meaning, so it gave them meaning in their lives because they didn't really have anything. But Egyptians would certainly disagree with you. Meaning was already in their world. It wasn't like they were looking at something and just saying like, oh yeah, that means this to me. To them, the meaning was there first, and it was how do they kind of take that meaning to help their lives. It was all around them all the time. Everything was sacred. I think if people really want to get a handle on this, there's one book that everybody needs to read. It is my favorite book about ancient Egypt by a long shot. I read it maybe about 16 years ago, even before I started doing practical magic. It is called Temple of the Cosmos, The Ancient Egyptian Experience of the Sacred by Jeremy Nadler. It is a fantastic book. You need to read it. The concept of what was sacred to the Egyptians is really their key. Egyptians lived in, it was almost like three worlds or realms, just what would be called the everyday life. Again, giving gods to everything. There was Geb, and the Geb is kind of the earth. He's pictured as kind of like a guy sitting on his side, kind of resting his head. Sometimes he's pictured with an enormous penis. Rock hard, if you will, because he's earth. Anyways, then you have Nuit, which is the sky. The stars. Ra's kind of in there. He stops by every once in a while. Then connecting the two of them, you have Shu, and that is atmosphere or air thing. And they're always pictured, there's Newt, she's doing like, I don't know, leaning over the world, almost like in an upside down U or a lowercase n kind of fashion. You have Geb who's kind of just leaning down, and then you have a dude standing in between them with his feet firmly planted in Geb, but with his hands reaching out towards Newt. What we need to understand is that the ancient Egyptians, they didn't see it as some kind of lower, higher. They weren't stacked. They were there all the time. They were always present. And this was the world that they lived in, a very rich, alive world. Some people would just say, well, they were just kind of making it up. It was in their imagination. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. I'm going to read again from Temple of the Cosmos. This image of the earth as God is clearly not based simply on sense perception, nor is it based upon logical reasoning. It is an imaginative vision that sees through the physical landscape into its interiority. Ancient Egyptian theology was to a large extent the product of this higher type of perception, which one might easily misinterpret as an imaginative construct or some kind of psychological projection. But it actually consists in an imaginative insight into the invisible forces and beings that exist in inner space, and that we grasp hold of it in symbolic images. Such a mode of awareness might seem to lose sight of the earth altogether, but it would be more accurate to say that our perception is augmented by an experience that resonates at a deeper level of the soul. It is at this deeper level of soul perception, as distinct from sense perception, that, as Henry Corbin says, the universe of archetype images is experienced as so many personal presences. So, if you need to hear that again, go back and re-listen to it. If ever there was a magician's metaphysical goal, there you go. That is it. There's an interiority to things. This is incredibly important stuff. So I urge you guys, if you didn't get a handle on that, please go back and listen to it again. Karen, what would you consider sacred right now? What is sacred to you right now? It can be a personal thing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, I guess free will, maybe, or like that's the word. Like, you can't tell me what to do. You can't make someone do stuff. I'm just thinking of currently a thing now. People some people's reproductive rights are in trouble. Are in danger. Making somebody go into like a career path that they don't want to. You would take a bullet for this. I guess. Yeah. I guess freedom of choice. I don't want to just say freedom. That sounds very no. Right? But no, I guess that sounds like bordering on political. Don't take my freedom. But it's the right to for someone to have, I guess, self autonomy. Is that what they're autonomy? Yeah, okay, yeah. Like the is it based on happiness, or is it based on something that you fundamentally think is important for us as a society? If you were to build a temple to a concept. Okay. Yeah, the concept of following your passion.
The concept,
It
the
sounds
temple of
so, you know,
passion. No,
I've been listening to a
no.
lot of like self-help like follow your dream podcasts and stuff too. It's like
My numbers are going
wait,
up.
I want to do, yeah, like it's like wait, this is my calling in life, not this stupid thing that I went to school for that I thought I should do or whatever. It's like, why don't I start this thing? Why don't I? So the freedom to be able to pick what you want, not like instead of like the perceived like what do people think or like.
Right.
Everyone says I have to be this. Like, actually, nobody's saying you have to be that. That's
The
somewhere
temple of-
you're a prisoner of like what you think
The
other
temple
people
of
are telling
life
you to do.
choice.
Life
and
choices. Yeah.
passion.
I wish I had a really cool, like more succinct way of putting it.
Well, that's
but
the thing about these
free
concepts.
will, maybe. Yeah, free. Yeah.
That's the thing about those concepts. The ancient Egyptians, they would have made a god out of what you're talking
Okay,
about. They
sure,
would
yeah.
they would have
That'd be
found
cool.
something that they didn't have, like
The
a
god
word
of
for.
self-care, something like that.
Right. But I think it's an important distinction because we live in a life that where we almost consider almost nothing sacred. And especially, I mean, a lot of people do have religion in their life, but those that people that are somewhat, and I'm not knocking them. Most of my best friends are atheists to like the nth degree. But I would ask them, like, what is sacred to you? It really is an important question. It's not something that, if you were to build a temple, what would you, to what gods would you pray in that temple?
Okay, cool. That's a good way of kind of narrowing it down. Like, okay, yeah, right. What would you, build that on?
Well, if you were to go to a priest in ancient Egypt and talk to them,
Okay.
say using something like Ramsay Dukes' 4 epistemological techniques by which the human mind attempts to operate upon its world from his occult classic Sasatbame, produced in 1974. This is a text that you don't know about it, Karen, but maybe some people listening do. He kind of divided the human mind's way to operate upon the world as 4 things. He said art, religion, science, and magic. So if you were to go to this Egyptian priest and try to talk to him about these 4 things, how the human mind operates on the world, he would say 2 things. First of all, he'd go, what the fuck is mine? And the second thing he says, I have no idea what you're talking about. These 4 things for the priest in ancient Egypt, they were the same thing. They were just the same thing. Like, and it's incredible for us to try and wrap our heads around. Magic was religion, was science, was art, it was everything.
Whoa.
So this is really cool.
And was there one word for it? Like, it's like.
No, there wasn't
okay.
really a word for it, but it was by the interaction of all the gods and the spirits that they had always around them, right? And say you went to a doctor, or what an ancient Egyptian had a doctor, and you had a broken arm. He would put your arm in a splint. He would rub some kind of a weird oil on it. He would say some incantations, and then he'd send you on your way, right? Like so that was kind of like he was
science and magic.
Science and magic. It was
together.
everything,
Oh, okay.
right? So it's kind of
Interesting. Okay,
yeah, it's very interesting. So. They were not dumb, though. I think we need to get it. They have the same brain that we did back then. Like, they really had the same capacities that we have now. And for them to be able to do what they did, that's what's mind-boggling to us, is that they were able to build these incredible architectural, like, not masterpieces. They are awe-inspiring structures. To them they were, and to us now they are awesome in the truest sense of the word. These gods and these forces, they were extremely functional and in many respects austere for the ancient Egyptians. And if you haven't guessed, I admire it greatly. The gods were always there, as clear as a person standing beside you. And this is not said, yeah, there's just somebody there. It's like they were literally right there beside you, as well as the spirits, which is really cool to think about. So I know a lot of people may be asking now, like, what about the magic, Doug? Where's the magic? Let's talk. Let's talk some kinds of ancient Egyptian magic. What needs to be known is that most magic in ancient Egypt was apotropaic. And that means it's more for protection. It was more about, they lived in a very harsh environment. There were animals that wanted to kill them. There were snakes in the water. There were snakes on the land. So a lot of their magic was to try and ward off the bad things to happen in their life. This was the main source of practical magic for this long period of time. So things like amulets or talismans. There's a difference between amulets and talismans. Amulets are there. They're just kind of all around. They're like, it's a really broad reason to use them. Talismans, they kind of have one specific aim. They had a lot of oils that they would use. Anytime that there was a sickness, the sickness was because of a demon. You'd use these things to try and get rid of demons and whatnot. They also had a lot of what was called sympathetic magic. Are you aware of sympathetic magic? If you heard the term sympathetic magic?
I have not heard about this.
So the best example, I think the one that everybody would know would be something like a voodoo doll.
Oh, okay. Sure.
They did not have voodoo dolls. They did have figurines. There would be things like schwapties, which they would use to, when they died, it was like a servant that you have or somebody with you after you die. But they would write names of people that they wanted to curse or bad things to happen to this person. They would write them on clay pots, and then they would take the pot and then they would smash it. I like this. Yeah. I don't know why, like a Greek wedding, but with some kind of malefica involved. Statues. Statues were incredibly important to the ancient Egyptians in giving life to statues. Their perception of statues were different than ours, obviously. When we see statues, oh, that's a statue, it's of this person, and that's it. To the ancient Egyptians, that would be a great disservice. It would be like saying, I know everything about that person just by looking at them. Like, Karen, you're 6'1" or 6'2".
No, 6.
You're 6 foot.
Yeah. Everyone always guesses higher, but
okay.
Just posture.
You look much taller than me.
Yeah, 6.5. Really.
There you go. Your red hair, you got freckles, you got brown eyes. I know everything about you. I know you're a generally angry person. You got this. You're a violent person, and there might be some kind of Irishness that's happening there. I don't really know. To an ancient Egyptian, they would say like, no, you. There's more to a statue. Their statues. They have the same interiority that I was talking about earlier that they would give to their gods. The statues also had some kind of agency in them. This is from Jeremy Nadler's Temple of the Cosmos. For ancient Egyptians, it was possible for a coalescence to occur between the physical image and the spiritual power that it represented. The statue of the goddess Sekhmet, for example, was not simply a physical representation of the goddess. Such statues were created with careful attention both to the material and to the formal figures carved into the stone. Important rites were performed upon that statue that had the effect of opening it towards the specific spiritual forces that the goddess mediated. Through the combination of skilled craftsmanship and performance of certain specific sacred rites, the statue could become the physical vehicle through which the goddess manifested as a tangible presence on the material plane. This is not idolatry. It is the invocation and apprehension of the divine in and through a material form, which is no longer simply a material form, but has acquired a within, a spirit. Now, I know a lot of people know how much I love my spirits, and I love this as well. Ancient Egyptian magic, another thing that thankfully has not followed us through magic, at least not that I know of. There was a lot of phlegm involved.
What?
Yeah, there was a lot of spitting, cursing things with spit, anointing things with spit, swallowing. They would
your own spit or other.
A lot of the times that we do know that they would have like a spell or a power or something, and they would have it written on a piece of papyri or have it written for them. They would either burn it, then put it in beer or some kind of liquid, or they would just put it in the liquid and it would slowly dissolve over time, and then they would ingest it, and they were ingesting the magic. They were big into licking, especially licking as far as
like wounds?
Wound. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's They really did like the whole phlegm thing. And if you ever meet somebody that says that they do ancient Egyptian magic, ask them when's the last time that they actually spat on something.
Yeah.
Say, oh yeah, or just spit on them and say you're welcome, and carry on with your day happily. Words were incredibly important. They were everything. They were absolutely everything. Writing and symbols, specifically things like the hieroglyphs. Not everybody could write. In fact, most of people in ancient Egypt were completely illiterate in every way, shape, or form. The scribes or the priests were the ones who did the writing. But speaking of words and the use of voice, remember the opening of the mouth ceremony. That was for dead things or for statues. And this is something that has carried through from ancient Egypt to now. The idea of casting a spell is basically spelling. Right?
Mm-hmm. Whoa.
Yeah.
Never gonna make that word connection.
Yeah. So, but that's truly it. Words, the ancient Egyptians, they got this, and the way to speak them, and what their magic is, and what their power. Perhaps my favorite thing that I get from practical ancient Egyptian magic is something called God threatening, in which you actually threaten the gods. Remember, these people were like somebody beside you, a presence that you had beside you. So you would threaten them with certain things if they did not act on your behalf. They would threaten the gods that if you don't do this thing for me, I will take action to make the sun not rise in the morning, and therefore your presence on earth is here. A better way of putting it from now would be like saying, if you don't do this thing for me, Jesus Christ, come Easter, I'm not going to buy any Cadbury cream eggs. We have to understand they were participants. They really truly thought that they were participants in the divine and the sanctity of life and their planet and their kingdom. They were there to help maintain the order of life. When we're talking about magic and books of spells, the one that everybody kind of knows of is called the Book of the Dead, also known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. The coffin and the pyramid texts, those were kind of there. Those are different. These are words, so I'm going to read for the last time. This was in one of the Book of the Dead. He says, "I gather magic from every place and from everyone who has it. Swift as a greyhound, quick as light. Form-created magic, which comes from the womb of the mother. God-conjuring magic, which comes from out of the silence. God-warming magic, which comes from the mother. Now this magic is given to me from every place and from everyone who has it. Swift as a greyhound, quick as light." Words, not just in life, but in death. They were something that can't be overstated. I'm going to get into a bit more of the mythology and the god stuff, but also kind of how they saw the self. The self was kind of divided into 4 parts. The top part, kind of like, I guess, the most heavenly aspect, or the spirit, was called the Ak, and kind of reigning over the Ak was the sun god Ra. I know everybody kind of knows. If they've seen Stargate, the movie, Ra was the falcon-headed god. He's the god of the sun. He travels through the sky. He starts off as a scarab beetle called Kepri. When he reaches the horizon, he's on a barge, you see. He's traveling through the sky and through the underworld. And the underworld, when he's not here, he's traveling what's called the bark of Ra. And on there, he's battling with the demon Apep or Apophis. And eventually he gets slain, and then that's why the sun comes up again in the morning. The other parts of the self is the Ba, which would be kind of the soul. And then the Ka, which is known as the essence or vital life force. I've heard it referred to as the ego part of the self. This is kind of ruled over by Osiris, this part of the soul. And the last one is Kat, which is the body, and that's just your physical body, which is ruled by Horus. What also happens is that we all know that the ancient Egyptians, they love mummies. Parts of your body would be taken out and put into what are called canopic jars. The 4 sons of Horus, which is the material, so this is part of your body. And then this Book of the Dead, these spells that were in the Book of the Dead, they were a way for you to navigate this kind of underworld called Duat or Duat, and the spells within them were there to help you get through the underworld. The Duat isn't really like an underworld. It translates to place of morning twilight. Not necessarily dawn, but that strange light on the horizon before the sun comes up, that weird feeling. Sometimes Venus is there. Just that odd liminal space. That's the Duat. So the Book of the Dead, or the Book of Coming Forth by Day, they have spells that assist the Ba or the Ka, that part of yourself. And you have to go through the underworld because you've been given the opening of the mouth, and you're able to speak, you're able to say these spells. It's kind of like an Atari game, like an old Atari game to get through the underworld. At one point, you have your heart weighed against a feather, and you have everybody's favorite Egyptian god, Anubis, who is the jackal-headed god. He weighs it. If you've been good in life, you'll be able to pass. Suffice to say, you have to go through all these trials. The Book of the Dead helps you through all of this kind of thing. And there's 2 things that kind of happen, and I might get a slap on the wrist here. There's one is that you go to a place called Aru, which is green pasture with wheat and barley. It's kind of like their heaven. Or there is another interpretation, and I really like this one, is that your journey through Duat is kind of the journey of Osiris. And I'll get to Osiris. He's a god. He had a jealous brother. Jealous brother killed him, cut him up, scattered his things all over Egypt and elsewhere. Osiris's wife/sister, because Game of Thrones stuff. Who knows? Anyways, but she collected all of the parts and eventually put him back together and mummified, wrapped him up, and eventually they had a child, which was Horus. Kind of your journey through the underworld is reflected in through Osiris's story. Eventually, Osiris grants you to become part of Ra and the sun journey. Once you've passed through the Duat, you will join Ra by being part of the eternal light, or coming forth by day. That is you, the eternal rays of the sun after you pass through the duat is you coming forth by day and being part of this pristine essence and joining Ra in where I said earlier about this parts of the self, Ache. So, might get a slap on the wrist. Again, we're talking about 2,800 years here, so a lot of stuff. Suffice to say that Egyptians took death very seriously, as we all know. Like, yeah, they did. They built the pyramids because of that. The pyramids, they're just big tombs. Maybe not. So I'm just going to talk a wee bit here about the weird stuff, the stuff, the ancient alien stuff, and the stuff you see on the supposed History Channel. Pyramids being built by the aliens? No. But who's to say that the aliens weren't built by the pyramids? No, there's some very strange stuff that occurs with the pyramids, specifically the Great Pyramids of Giza. And current theories as to how they were built, not a lot of them make sense. A lot of them said that there was a ramp. The ramp is going to have to be almost as big as the pyramid, if not bigger. There's no archaeological evidence for this ramp. The settlements, people said that they just slept on the ramp. If this ramp thing was true in the time frame that it took to build the pyramids, it would mean that they'd have to lay a multi-ton stone every 90 seconds. I don't think we'll ever really know how the pyramids were built. The pyramids as tombs doesn't seem right to me either. There's some other stuff that I'm kind of trying to mull through, and if this stuff is interesting you, I'll talk about some writers. To me, the Egyptians were obsessed with the stars, specifically Sirius and the constellation Orion, specifically his belt. The pyramids seem like immortality machines. They seem like a way for the king or the pharaoh to be part of matching their kingdom or their territory with the stars themselves, and there's much to go on here. They also have talked constantly in the coffin texts about the Decans, which I'm going to do a whole episode on in the Decans. I can't go into it too much, but yes, the things that they were obsessed about, I think they represented in a lot of their architecture, and definitely with Giza. There are people like John Anthony West, Robert Temple, Robert Bovell, Graham Hancock. They're not crazy. The guys that go into this, they're all called pseudo-archaeologists. I don't think all of it's correct, but I think the direction they're going is very interesting, and if not just exciting for the story component, there are parts of it that do certainly ring true. If you're interested, head there. These are not crazy people, and these are people that have been studying Egypt, specifically Robert Bovell, for like their entire life. Egyptology itself is filled with charlatans. I just need people to realize this. Yeah, they really are. There's one dude by the name of Zahi Hawass who he was the explorer in residence for the National Geographic Society for like more than a decade, I think. He is maybe one of the worst people just in archaeology. People would find things and then he would come and claim them for himself. He's not a very nice guy, really terrible figure. But that being said, Egyptology, a lot of Egyptology is also the Egyptian history is big question marks. Like, we don't know. Where's Punt? No idea. We have no idea. There's conjecture. So I have to be a little bit careful because there's a friend of mine who's literally working in Cairo right now to help set up their new museum, the Grand Egyptian Museum, and it looks amazing. So she might have something to say when she comes back from Cairo to me, should she ever listen to this episode. Aliens? No. I think, though, that this is indicative of something. The fact that there's all these programs about aliens building the pyramids. Are we actually longing for this alien idea to be true, or are we longing for a return to the mindset and ontology the ancient Egyptians held? Again, the sanctity of everything, the sanctity of life. Egyptian magic now. So you might be saying, you know what, I want to do ancient Egyptian magic. I say, cool, you got a lot of spit? No, but I'm here to tell you that if you're doing any kind of practical Western magic or magic within the Western tradition, you are already doing Egyptian magic. Seriously. Western magic is Egyptian magic. End of discussion. That's it. Words, crystals or lapidaries, amulets, talismans, statues, the timing, decans, astrology, consecration, tools, ancestors, incense. It's all ancient Egyptian. That's it. Like you don't really have to go that much farther. You're doing Egyptian magic already. Steer clear of any books, modern books specifically, that say that it's practical Egyptian magic. It's not. Sorry. Probably as far back as I go, as far as Egyptian magic is probably the Greek magical papyri, but that's an episode for another time. So Egyptian magic, guess what? You're already doing it. If you're doing magic, you're already doing it. But I would urge you to look at and give proper thought and regards to ancient Egyptian metaphysics, their ontology, their epistemology, and their phenomenology. That's where the magic truly is. The things that I've been talking about now, the idea that everything is alive and that we are surrounded by spirits, not just in the things that we build, but at all times. That's where the magic is. So what do the ancient Egyptians hold sacred? How did they express its sanctity? How did they figure out their world? Their universe was alive. Everything was magical and it surrounded them. I truly think that the ancient Egyptian metaphysics can inform huge parts of your journey if this is where you want to go. It really can. And this goes across the board for everybody doing any kind of magic. Ancient Egypt has much to guide you, not so much in their practical spells, but more to do with how they saw the world and their place in it. Find out how. Everything you need isn't in some Neoplatonic intelligible realm that is only possible through theurgy and whatnot. It's right here. It's already here. It's on Earth. It's everything you see. It's the stars and the spirits all around you. You've just forgotten. So it's time to remember. Find that curiosity that you had as a child when you first heard about ancient Egypt, the pyramids, the gods, the mummies, the statues, all of it. It's there, I guarantee you. Egypt calls to you, as it has for countless other people throughout the ages, and it's time for you to listen. That's it. So where to go from here? Oh no, we're not done, Karen.
Oh yeah,
you're not off the hook yet.
I feel like just a pause break. Right?
So where to go from here? As I said, stay away from ancient Egypt practical books on magic. Most of them are garbage. I'm going to say 99% of them are garbage. Of course, start with the book Temple of the Cosmos by Jeremy Nadler. It is the best book on ancient Egypt, in my opinion. For me, it was turning the page like, yes, I get it. Yes, I get it. Yes, I get it. Wow, ancient Egypt is awesome. That is the book you need. Get that book. The coffin texts and the pyramid texts, very important. Definitely take a look into that. There's a book written by one of my favorite authors. His name is David Rankin. He does work with Stephen Skinner, but he himself wrote a book just called Heka, and it is about Heka, and it's great as well. For general knowledge and history of ancient Egypt, there's so much. There's so many books about ancient Egypt. It's had a hold on our imagination for such a long period of time. In my show notes, I will have links of their Egyptian history and some books about their gods and their mythology. I'm also going to put up a podcast on there that I think it's pretty good. I enjoy it. But I'm going to do something weird in this one. In my show notes, I'm actually going to include a video game called Egypt Old Kingdom. It's a really good way to learn about ancient Egypt, actually, and it's fun, but it's something that you should definitely check out. There's an excellent chapter on ancient Egypt, specifically the pyramids and archaeology, called The Mirror of Heaven, in a book by Gordon White called Starships. I know I seem to big up Gordon White in every episode I do. He's very good, and buy all of his books. I'm just going to say that. Ancient Egyptian Magic. Books on this. There's a book called Magic in Ancient Egypt by Geraldine Pinch. And there's also a book called Mechanics of Ancient Egyptian Magical Practice by Robert Rittner. Those are great books. Wonderful resources to use. I have to give a shout out in this episode to Lori Romano for those two book recommendations and for also giving me an image that I will be using on my website for this specific episode. Lori takes ancient Egyptian magic very seriously. She's got a website called Anubion Creations where she sells oils and powders and incense. She also gave me a link to a website called Persabu, or the House of Jackals. If you're like me and you like cynocephalia, which is people with dog heads, I don't know why I'm attracted to that, but there you go. It's about the god Anubis and what warm-blooded magician doesn't love Anubis. I know, Anubis is just fucking cool. Everybody loves Anubis. Lori Romano, she takes ancient Egyptian magic very seriously. She's an excellent resource. Head there. Authors that I mentioned earlier regarding the stranger aspects of ancient Egypt and the pyramids and the temples and whatnot, please read those. I will have links in the show notes for those guys. Finally and lastly, get the metaphysics, guys. We cannot go back to ancient Egypt, nor should we. But of all the ancient cultures, Mesoamerican, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Toltecs, Babylonian, Greek, or Chinese, ancient Indian culture, none of them speak to me as much as Egyptians do. Less so their practical magic, more so the way they saw the world and how they navigated their world. And this animism, to see that there is an interiority within all things, that there's a striving for some kind of agency. It's all there. The Egyptians, they really got it. They really did. Walk like an Egyptian, I say no thanks. Think like an Egyptian is what I will say. And that is the end of the episode.
Oh, wow.
Karen,
okay.
You did it.
I did it. I was like, I don't know if the audience was wondering, like, yes, I did not do my homework for this episode. I'm just here to learn. I don't know shit.
That's all good.
Yeah, because I'm sort of like the audience surrogate. I'm just nodding like, oh, wow. Okay.
And nod you did. I saw
yes,
that.
I was, I just learned all the new stuff today. That's cool. I'm like, I don't have any facts of my own. I learned two things before I came today, that about Heka was a god and or a magic, like the Force.
Yep.
And I learned that that pre-dawn time was the magical, the bewitching time. So that's the kind of one thing
you learned about Duat.
Duat, yeah, okay,
Duat.
that's
very
right.
Cool stuff. Check it out, everybody.
All right.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So for those interested, head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you will find links on how to subscribe to iTunes, to Spotify, to Stitcher, to Google Play, to YouTube. If they've got podcasts, I'm going to be there. Also on my website, you will find links to show notes. They're absolutely fantastic. Check them out. On my website, you'll also find links to my Twitter page, to my Facebook page, and to Instagram. If you enjoy the program, please go to iTunes and leave a little review for me. A little writing would be really appreciated. Say a word about the podcast if you really enjoy it. I know most people, when they enjoy something, they're just like, somebody else will say it for me. No. If you really like what I'm doing here, please try to say something. Speak up. I don't know what happened, but since my last episode, something happened. I mean, I did do an episode on the devil, and the devil's kind of popular, but my podcast has basically been listed in the top 20 of pretty much every country's chart on spirituality on Chartable. So thanks. I guess you're talking about the podcast to other people, and if you are, you have my eternal thanks. You guys are amazing. But stick around. We're just getting started. I've literally been doing this for 6 months. It's going to get so much better. So thank you guys all for listening and recommending it to your friends. I can't thank you enough. It's very awesome that you're doing that. Yeah, that's the end of the episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. But we are going to end it with the post-show quid pro quo. Karen, are you ready?
Sure, yeah.
All right, so you are a comedian.
Yeah.
That is your profession.
I'm sure you guys could tell.
Karen, because this is a somewhat educational podcast, and I like to educate the people, I was wondering about your perspective as not just a jobbing comedian, but as one who probably has studied comedy. Which comedic figure would you say in the last 40 years is probably not given enough recognition for what they did for comedy?
Oh, boy. I mean, I don't know if it's a small scale. I can think of a friend I have in Calgary who he's still currently a practicing comedian, James Moore, who started an open mic night in Calgary in 2005 just to give it, because he was frustrated that there's not enough stage time. He's like, it's like, if I want stage time, there's like 2 comedy clubs. If I'm not one of their people, if I start my own open mic, then I will get a chance. Like, at least I can give myself stage time. And it is definitely, it's Western Canada's longest running open mic, because again, it's been from 2005. I guess they're in their 15th year, that my math is correct. It's where I started comedy. And James doesn't even put himself on stage anymore. He's so busy just being kind of like the godfather of like Monday nights. I don't know if I said that that's what its name is, Comedy Monday Night. Right. It's lived in a few different homes, but he made sure to never name it after the bar or whatever, because the bar has changed. But at least he keeps the brand name the same. It's not comedy at so-and-so. Yeah, just so many, any comedian, like actors who've filmed in Calgary, like the ones in Fargo or something like that, who like they'll drop in and do it. It's like Hannibal Buress has dropped in. And just like where we
It was
all
like
go.
an
whenever
oasis, and like a nice little oasis.
Yeah,
of
yeah. It's
comedy.
almost like it's like an airport departure lounge, like comics who've just finished, because it's a Monday, so comics who've just finished their weekend, or comics who are just arriving, and comics who either you work for this chain of clubs, or you don't, or you're an independent comic. They would normally never work together, but again, it's more than just an open mic night.
What's his name again?
Oh, his name is James Moore.
James Moore.
And again, it's amazing how he started it so he could give himself an opportunity. And it's been years since I don't live in Calgary anymore, but since he's put himself on stage, he's just more the guy running, just creating this thing for other folks.
And helped a ton of people.
I think helped a lot. Like it was where I felt safe, like just starting comedy. I'm like, all right, I'll do it a random Monday in a bar. I don't want to try if I'm going to die on stage. I want to do it where no one really knows it.
Right.
And he gives just everyone a chance. So yeah, I feel like not that it's small scale, but he's someone I guess I appreciate. He was undervalued, because I'm saying if I say the name James Moore, there's a good chance your audience doesn't know who he is.
Oh.
But
they'll look him up though.
Yeah. Again, he's a local hero. He's definitely hold a space in our heart, because he was the place that the thing he created is like open mics don't last all that long.
No.
There's always somebody who comes along, and I get the fact that it's had to move bars a few times. Management will come along like, no, we're doing a karaoke night instead, or whatever. Like there's always somebody who kills comedy at their club. So
always.
The fact that he's kept it running, probably at his own financial expense. Once he got in a car crash earlier that day, broke his leg, and still ran the show. Like you could have canceled the show or called someone else in. It's
Not
like
for comedy.
it's okay. We would understand. You could have canceled that night, but So I guess if that's a long way of saying, I guess that's who I guess is an unsung hero.
He'd be a priest in the temple of
Sure,
comedy.
yeah, there you go.
He would be
people who've met him, thinks he's just a super swell guy.
He'd be the archbishop of the deacon or of the temple of comedy in Calgary, Alberta.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Let's all tie that to
I love
put a
it.
nice little bow on it.
Yeah, it's great. Wonderful, Karen. Karen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks. This has been really cool.
That's the end of the show, everybody. Thank you for listening. This has been What Magic Is This? My name is Douglas Batchelor, and we'll talk at you soon. Stay luminous. Bye-bye.